What is going on, guys? Today I have my good friend Mark Kashef with me. You may have seen him on the channel before. He's basically an AI mad scientist, and in this episode we're going to be going over some make.com hacks as well as some sample automations that you can begin building today to get a sense of kind of what you could build with this platform. Saying he's proficient with make.com is an understatement, so I'm super happy to see what we can build as well as learn some tips and tricks from him along the way. Mark, happy to have you on the channel, and I appreciate you taking time to do this as always. So
yeah, it's a pleasure as always, and I'm pumped to show your audience some little golden nuggets to help them go from 0 to 1 as quickly as possible, and go over some example automations just to get the creativity in terms of what's possible.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I'm excited to do it. Cool. Well, I'll let you kind of steer this ship here. I kind of want to see, like, I'm going to ask you some questions along the way as we go through this, because I just want to see, like, as a non-technical person, how could somebody begin using make.com today to build just like cool automations, and let's see some hacks and tips along the way, because you've been using this platform for, almost years at this point.
Yeah,
so yeah, best person to learn from. So let's dive into it.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. So I'm going to share my screen here. Let's do it. All right. So if you look at here, we have a blank canvas, which if you've used Make, you're familiar with it. If not, this purple button opens the doors, and let me just hide this, to all kinds of automations here. Hundreds, if not like thousands of integrations that you can actually use. So right off the bat, we're going to start off with a big hack, which is all of these automations here. Theoretically, if you knew what you wanted and you could just, go through a list of every single possible option and threw it into something like ChatGPT and said, hey, here's the workflow I'm trying to do. Can you draft out what I would have to put, like every puzzle piece or every Lego block, how I'd have to connect them together? Now, there's a couple options you could use. There's one that's out of the box here, which I'll get to shortly, called the AI assistant that's still in beta, where you can actually ask for something. It will draft out an actual scenario for you end to end. It's not always 100%, but I'll show you a little hack that I have in my back pocket that'll be super helpful. So back in December, meaning this is not necessarily completely up to date, but I had my team go through manually, just because they don't have an open platform, make.com, and go through every single possible automation from the tool, and let me just zoom in a bit here, from the tool to the actual action associated to that tool. Because our goal was, and it's been really helpful for us, is if we could just talk to Claude or ChatGPT and ask, hey, here's what I'm trying to do. What are the different pieces I would need to get there? Because that removes like 80% of the easy work to just figure out what modules do I have, what is a module, which service should be the right service, etc. So, and I'll also make this available for your community and your audience as well, so they can use that at their heart's content. Now, what we can do with that shiny little PDF is if we go into ChatGPT, and ideally we go into something like O3 Mini High, just because it has a good input context window, because it's a pretty big file. We could just go and drag and drop this bad boy, put that here, and then I can just basically ask for what I'm looking for. So I'm going to use my little voice to text app and say, I want to create an automation that goes from receiving a Slack message to analyzing that Slack message using OpenAI, to then routing that message back to our database in Airtable to store it, and then route that to response created by another OpenAI LM module, and then send that back to Slack as a message response. Now, I could be just starting here, and I want to send this over, and then using a reasoning model is cool because it'll draft out exactly what the possible options are, and we can even ask one more question, which is, can you just give me a cheat sheet of like module by module what we need to put step by step?
Right. That's pretty awesome. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like I remember when you were scraping all of Make's like databases or whatever, their documentation or whatever, to get this PDF, like that was pretty time consuming, wasn't it? Like it wasn't something easy to do.
I didn't do it the AI-ified way. I literally had my virtual assistants go and like check every module, write it down. So this is the most manual way possible, but hopefully no one else ever has to do that.
Love it.
So you can see here, it comes up with a suggestion: Slack message trigger, analyze the message with OpenAI. And now one thing I'm looking at is I want the exact name of it. So I'll say, can you give me in hyper succinct bullets the exact flow and exact names of the modules I'd need to construct this automation? Nothing else, no other commentary. Now you're going to see why I really care for this output to be this succinct, because we're going to copy it and do something with it. All right, and you see here, we get exactly what we wanted, which is the exact list. So what I can do now is be lazy, copy this, go back into Make, and even if I don't know anything, I can say, make this automation, pun intended, and we'll just put this here, and then it's now going to start drafting the blueprint before our eyes. Now again, the hit rate is not always 100%. Sometimes it'll throw in a random module, even though I literally asked for a different module. But again, if you want to go from thinking to drafting, you can see here, I think it actually got the majority of these pieces right on the first try. So it is watching for messages. It's going to analyze that message using OpenAI. It's going to create a record in an Airtable to store that message. It's going to draft a response and then create a message back. Now, are these the right exact modules depending on your use case? Who knows? It depends exactly what you're trying to do. But this got us from thinking to doing very quickly.
Right. Should be pretty easy to reverse engineer to like actually connect all of this, I'm sure. I'm easier than having to piece together one by one.
Yeah, now the hard part, the quote unquote hard part, is just like being able to log in to each and every account, adding an API key to OpenAI if you've never done that,
Right.
authenticating into Airtable, and all the administrative stuff. But a lot of the hard work is in just thinking and imagining, what can I do? So if you were trying to come up with something else, so let's take this now. Let's see if I can create a new scenario. Discard, and I'll create a new scenario. And we'll go here and say something like, I want to create a Google Sheet that when a new row is added, we take the information in that row, especially if we receive multiple at a time, which we do, and we iterate through those rows, and then send each one that we receive to OpenAI to analyze a lead and qualify them based on some criteria. And then we return back to that Google Sheet and update that row with a new field that says whether or not they're qualified, either yes or no. Now, this is a super theoretically simple automation, but if you don't know what tool you could use to create an iteration or loop through something, you wouldn't really know where to get started. So this is going to start drafting. You can see here the blueprint, and it should take probably 5 to 10 more seconds and come up with the entire module.
Nice.
And you can see right there, it was smart enough to know, you know what, I said loop through. So we probably need this thing called an iterator. And what an iterator does is it goes through, if you have multiple responses at once, or in this case, multiple Google Sheet rows added, and zips through and queues each one through the process so that you can actually loop through that entire list.
I see. Me, if I were to be building this from scratch, iterator, for whatever reason, that word would just scare me. I'm like, what the hell does this even do? So the fact that it's like, oh, knows exactly what you're trying to accomplish, paste it in there, you don't need to really think about it. So that's good to know.
Yeah, exactly. And you can keep going a lot more in depth, especially if you want to try something a little bit more hairy, which is you can ask for, let's say, a mermaid diagram for a more complicated procedure. So if I say something like, okay, I want to create a completely different type of automation. I want you to come up completely on your own using the exact module names based on the list I gave you. Create a system for scoring and qualifying leads at scale, knowing that we want to use something like a Google Sheet. We want to use Slack somewhere in there. We want to use an Airtable somewhere in there. Can you just draft an entire process and create a Mermaid diagram to represent this flow using the exact name of the modules we'd need to achieve it? Try and create something that is efficient, helpful, and obviously enriches our leads that we actually receive. So in this case, you can actually ask it to imagine for you. So now it's going to take its time, come up with a Mermaid diagram, and then I'll show you how you can actually visualize that, whether you're using ChatGPT or Claude, and have that help you inspire the process of what you can build.
Got it.
Right, and you get something like this. And if you're not familiar with what Mermaid even is, it just creates workflows for you really easily in a way that you can visualize any process. So if we take this and then we go into mermaidchart.com, you can use it for I think up to 4 or 5 diagrams for free. You can also use Mermaid Live Editor as well. So if you go into Mermaid Live Editor, go on Playground, and then you just paste that actual payload, you'll get something like this, which is super cool because you can start to audit what the process should look like. So a new lead is added to Google Sheets. It's saying that you should use a service called Clearbit to enrich the lead, use OpenAI to analyze the lead quality. If they're a qualified lead, create record in Airtable, otherwise in say like qualified lead, otherwise say unqualified lead. And then if it's qualified, send it to the Slack channel saying qualified lead alert. And then if you want to, do the same thing for the unqualified lead. But the mental model here is just you're asking, hey, here's what I'm trying to automate. Here's kind of like my systems I'm using. Come up with something. And this helps you just like draft out what that could look like. And then again, you go from this back to make and then have that feedback loop back and forth.
I see.
So that's how you can use some hacks just to get started. Now, is it cool if I start going through some of the automations we prepared?
Sure, go for it.
All right, so let's get into some nitty gritty. So if we go into this first automation here, I'm just gonna do auto align. This is pretty straightforward. It's looking for a Calendly event under the description of vibe coding, And whenever someone actually books that Calendly, it's going to extract a few different variables. Now, why do we care to extract variables? Just because when you run modules in make.com and you're receiving what's called a payload of information, that payload can be very long. And it'll be super clear once we actually run this. But you don't really care for probably 80 to 90% of the data you're getting, at least not at once. So you use this step called set multiple variables to kind of put on the side the stuff that you do care about. So you can easily refer back to them later. And then we're going to use this perplexity step to do research about the lead that booked that vibe coding session with us, and then use perplexity for that. And if you're not familiar with what perplexity is, it's basically a tool to help you search the internet that has an API that can speak to the live internet versus most APIs that have just like static knowledge from the language model itself. So we have a prompt here that says summarize the professional background and any relevant information about, and then in this case, name, the email, and then company, and then everything else in terms of the information there. We set it up as what's called a user prompt. You typically have two types of prompts, a system prompt and a user prompt. Most people, when you're writing prompts to Claude or GPT, you're sending a user prompt. A system prompt is basically telling the prompt itself, like, here's the persona you should take on, or here's the output format you should have. It's a lot more high level, whereas user prompt is much more detailed, like we're using here. Once it does research about that lead, we then put it into OpenAI just to do some more basically synthesis of the research we did about them. And then once we have that, you'll see here the prompt. It'll say, please summarize this text. And you'll notice that with Make and N8N and all kinds of tools is that it always carries forward the last piece of the automation, but basically what the output was. So from Perplexity, we'll get a few different pieces of, again, payload. The one we care about is whatever the message is, which is the finalization of the research about that lead. And then we'll say a few things like summarize the final input by returning a JSON object. And JSON is basically, again, a structured format to receive that information. And we basically tell it, this is what we care about. We want name, we want job title, we want industry, notable press, highlights, general summary, etc. And then we want to write that to a Google Sheet right here. So this is the Google Sheet. We want to have those fields mapped to this sheet. And how you do that is pretty straightforward. When you click on add a row, as long as you're actually linked to the Google Sheet itself, meaning you've authenticated yourself and you've signed into your Google Sheet account, you can then say, I want to write anything from this automation to lead research. And then you tell it, literally map it step by step. For name, in this column, I want you to put this piece of information, which is the result from OpenAI for name, the result for industry, etc., etc. And once you're done mapping, now you have the automation ready to go. So if you just click play, all right, and I go to my hypothetical calendar here, and I go in book, all right, so we'll just say Brock at vibecoding.com, Vibe Coding Pro, schedule event. All right, so that should flow through. You'll see here, we received notification of that. And like I said before, you get all of this. If you go to this little output bundles, this is everything you get. Now, do you care about 90% of this? Do you care about text reminder number? No, probably not. Do you care about meeting notes? Maybe. But in this case, that's why we're doing the set variables. What we got out of this output here, if we go to output bundles, is we just care about extracting the name, last name, the full name, lead email, the company name, etc.
Right. And you could extract any of the custom variables for whatever, is populated inside there for whatever use case you're looking for. But that's just the stuff that we chose to, because that's only information that needs to be mapped into our Google Sheets, essentially.
Yeah, and the beautiful thing is, once you've gotten that information, or received it rather, you can always reference it down the line. So even if you build a part of your automation 10 steps later, you'll always have this Calendly payload to go back to if you need to retrieve information or add different variables that you didn't receive before because you didn't actually think about the next step you wanted to add in your automation.
Right.
Now, in this case,
so it's gone through the check mark. That obviously means that it's gone through each of these steps. So, it looks like it actually just finished all of them.
Yeah. So in this case, one note here is Perplexity has a few different models. It has Sonar, which is basic research, has Sonar Pro, which is slightly more. It has Reasoning and Reasoning Pro, which basically use the reasoning models like O3 Mini, 3.7 Sonnet from Claude to add on to actually synthesize whatever it researched. And then it has Deep Research, which is one, way more expensive, but two, it's a lot more comprehensive. Now, I destined this automation for failure by putting a real person Brock, not your last name, and a non-real company and a non-real name. So I don't expect too much fireworks here. And so somehow it found Brock M is Brock
Interesting.
Messerich. Oh, probably because vibe coding appears in
Yeah.
like your YouTube
Keyword.
titles.
Yeah.
So see, that's the power of deep research. I gave it such an awful input, and we were still able to get something.
Interesting.
And if we go to this row here and zoom in just a bit.
Real quick, let me take 10 seconds to say if you want to use make.com, there's a link in the description to sign up. This will give you access to 1 month of their pro plan for free, along with 10,000 operations per month. Now back to the video.
All right, we got Brock, we got industry AI assisted software development. Well done, you've been promoted to that industry. Content creator and AI educator, it's really complimenting you. And then it's highlighting all the stuff you do, like talking about Aqua Voice, Data Button. You know, that's super cool.
Yeah.
And then a summary of who you are. So you're clearly a prominent figure. I'm very privileged to be speaking to you, my friend.
Oh, how kind, Perplexity. I appreciate it.
It's very, very, very kind.
Oh, man.
Cool. So that's automation numero uno. Any questions on that before I go to the next one?
No, I think that all looks awesome. I mean, that seems like a pretty practical use case for anybody, specifically if you're a business owner, obviously. You know, if you have people booking calendar events, why not just have some form of automation where you could automatically research this person and then, I don't know, save you time so you don't need to like waste your time before a meeting researching somebody. So yeah, I like that use case. Seems simple enough to set up. Let's move on to the next one.
Cool. Let's do it. So next one is a content research assistant. So let's go into here and we'll just auto align and we'll zoom in again. Now that we're familiar with what Perplexity is.
Question. One question.
Yeah.
Sorry to cut you off. So for all of these, we used that initial tool we talked about in the beginning, like that little hack in order to create this flow. And now it's just up to us to go in and configure each of this, right?
Yeah. So in this case, I always start with that hack, thinking through, and then I start to fine tune the little modules that I need as I start building it.
Got it. Makes sense.
Yeah. So if we go back to Perplexity, so we have here a specific prompt, and I'll zoom in. So research trending topics. You could call this even, I can change this on the fly. Research trending AI topics. Nice. And then please identify the most recent trends from the past week and include insights from reliable sources like Google Trends, social media platforms, and industry reports. Focus on AI tech. Provide a summary in bullet form with examples and citations for each trend. If possible, include predictions for future growth or impact. And again, here we're worried about the format of the output. So you can say, provide a JSON object with all this metadata or all this information. And all we want is for it to return the JSON. Because once we have that, we can reuse that in different parts of the automation.
For sure. That's like we were talking about in the previous automation. There's a whole bunch of jargon. We only want those couple custom fields to take over to the next steps. Correct?
Well, yeah, we're going to create, basically Perplexity is going to actually use an LLM to synthesize what it finds. It's going to give us a payload. I want to make sure that that response is in a format that we can recycle for other parts of the automation that need it to be in JSON format.
Got it, I see.
And for anyone that doesn't know, JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. So it's a way to exchange data through APIs. So if we just click this, now we're going to parse that JSON that we asked for. Then we're going to iterate through those parts because obviously if we're receiving multiple highlights or multiple news trends, if we want to like create a newsletter for ourselves of what's happening, we need to iterate through those. If we want to store it in a Google Sheet, we can do that. And then we can aggregate that text. So you can see here, I am just creating what's called a new line. Basically, I'm formatting all the information we've retrieved from iterating through it, and we're prepping it to go into OpenAI. And what OpenAI is going to do is something a bit different than what we've gone through before. So we're saying here, return the result using HTML elements. Now, what does this mean in plain English? HTML is primarily what's used to build the websites, HTML and CSS, and you can use HTML to do formatting for formats like email. So if you've ever seen a newsletter in your inbox that has some formatting, some pretty colors, a lot of that is HTML manipulation. So instead of us worrying about coding that ourselves or learning HTML, which we're not going to do, we just ask O3 Mini, which is a very good reasoning model from OpenAI, to return the result that we received and use the following variables, which is recipient name, content ideas, URL, general summary. And then we're going to say generate a personalized email body that includes a greeting, a brief introduction mentioning the client's name, use a creative and friendly tone, And then we use ChatGPT to come up with this style, this HTML. I didn't do it myself. I just said, hey, create HTML that would make a newsletter look really pretty, and then take these variables in as inputs. So all this stuff is AI generated HTML for the formatting, and just saying, you know what, best regards, hi Mark, etc. So that's the formatting here, and then we're just including the text content from the content ideas. And then when we click save right here, if we go to the next step, which is Gmail, we're going to use the create a draft step. That when we click on this email here, we're going to call it subject, your weekly content ideas, and all we're taking as an input for the content is the result, which is going to be an HTML, which should theoretically cause some auto formatting to occur.
Awesome. Love it. So we're going to get a pretty like sweet looking output of this, so the email is not going to look just like
plain text blob kind of thing.
Yeah, sure.
Exactly.
Awesome. Love it.
So
see, I guess that right there, like to make a little point, that shows kind of the power of using these different nodes within inside of make.com, because otherwise we could just like not get really defined with the prompt we give it and we get a really shitty looking output. Whereas if we get really into the depths of it, like we could customize it however we want, get the output to look like spectacular, that sort of stuff. So I just want to note on that, because it looks like this is, more than just a little basic automation that's going to give a pretty bad looking output. This is something that's actually could be like production ready potentially if you have a newsletter or something. So interesting.
Yeah, or again, like my biggest use case for this is creating a newsletter for myself to keep up with the 100,000 new things that are game changing every single day. So in this case, because we're initiating this automation by saying go and research, we're not actually waiting for an outside force. So we can just run this and not wait for something to happen to trigger it.
I see.
So if we click on play here, this should start going on its own, which it's going to do. We'll let it do its thing, and then we'll discuss once it's done running.
If we wanted to, we could make it so maybe it triggers every day at 8 p.m. or whatever the case may be, right?
Yeah, and I'll show you how you can do that.
Yeah, sweet.
All right, and it's done running here, and we got a lot of success on the nodes. So if we go to output bundle right here, you'll see super cool from Perplexity is it now gives you citations. So we know exactly what outlets and what URLs we use to come up with the research. If we go down here to this little thing called content, this is the actual response from the AI with all the new trends, everything it came up with. And then this parse JSON is just extracting the stuff we care about.
Nice.
Go to output bundles. So we just care about the title, the description, URL, and a general summary, like the TLDR of what this thing's about. And if we close that, this is now iterating through, like you saw, each and every one of those steps. We're adding that to a Google Sheet, and then we're going to OpenAI and saying, let's create a custom email with these highlights of everything we saw in terms of the news, and let's throw it into Gmail. And then Gmail will look like this. It'll create an email ID. It'll create a message ID. And if I go back to my email, I should see a draft, which I do. And if we open this draft, you'll see you're not getting some ugly formatted email. You're getting some hi recipient name, which we can also customize if it's to someone else. You'll see it's bifurcating each one of these rows. It has the header look nice and pretty, and it has the link to the source and the summary here as well. So pretty sweet automation, and you can customize this as you want. And because we have this OpenAI step right here, should you want presented in a different way, you can do that pretty easily. And the hack here, the additional hack, is don't worry about manipulating this HTML ever yourself. So you just go in back in the prompt, and then you can just take this and tell Claude, hey, I don't like the way it's outputting this. I want it to be a little bit different, and then we can change it.
Nice. Love it.
Yeah. So that's numero dos. Is that one?
That's a cool one, and that's one I would personally use every day. So,
all right, cool. So let's keep it rolling. So for the last one, I tried to imagine something completely off the cuff that is not standard. So I was thinking, what if you had a Google form that your employees or your teammates could fill out that would say, you know what, let's say they did a really good job this month and they want to treat themselves to a custom image mug. They could actually ask for that, and it would not only generate but submit an order to actually send it to them.
Interesting.
Yeah, so we're not going to do the final part, which is to submit the order, because I'm not trying to spend money on this episode on mugs that I don't want, and shipping and all that stuff. So we're going to just simulate most of that process. So here we're going to use this product called Printify, no affiliation, but what Printify looks like is if you go to the website, you can basically do print on demand. So ceramic mugs, stainless steel water bottles, they're getting a free shout out for absolutely no reason, but just because it's a cool use case. But basically, you can print all kinds of accessories on demand. What popped out to me is that like of the many platforms that do this, they have really good make integrations. So if you double click here and you just go into Printify, you can do all kinds of things, which to me is always a good signal that this service is like, it's very friendly when it comes to automation. So you can do things like you can get an image of an existing product, you can list uploaded images you've already done, you can upload an image, which is what we care to do, because if we want to go from a Google form rather, to generating an image based on that preference using, let's say, DALL-E, until we get the new image generation from GPT-4 or GPT-4o. Until that's in the API, we'll use DALL-E for now. And you have all of these different things. If you want to eventually automatically submit the order, you can see here, submit an order. So you could go from employee or colleague asking for it, to it generating, to creating the cup, to publishing that cup, to sending that cup to their doorstep within weeks.
Yeah, that's actually pretty crazy if you think about it. If only we had 4.0 image generation available via the API, but guess we do
I'm
not.
sure it's coming soon.
DALL-E will, yeah, this will do.
Yes. So in this case, we have Google Sheet, which says watch new rows. So in this case, we have a Google form that links to this Google Sheet. Okay. We already have a couple ones we actually tried. And then once you fill this out, just to show you how this would work, let's say product, vibe, coding, cup. And we say, describe your image, a redhead drinking.
You don't want to be the vibe coder?
A vibe. No, man, you own that. You own that.
Yeah. Oh.
And I want it to be a 10 ounce. If I submit that, okay, that should now log in the actual Google Sheet. So there you go, vibe coding cup. So that's stored there as well, just for our own history and reference. And then if we go back to the make automation, if we click play, it's going to go through. Now, one thing I'm missing, and I left it on purpose, is an iterator, because if you got multiple requests at once, you would want to iterate through those requests to make sure you're creating a product for each and every request properly.
I see. If there was some trigger, like on demand, yeah, I see.
Exactly. And we'll go through and look at the actual prompt, what's happening here, and the final result, but we'll just...
That was actually pretty quick.
Yeah, super quick. So the first one, we went and used the OpenAI module to generate an image. And if we look at the prompt, it's nothing groundbreaking. It's create a high resolution, print ready image, desired image. And now we're just referencing. You can see Google Sheets is throbbing as a module to tell you, hey, you know what? You're using me. And it's referencing this piece here that I just clicked and added to our payload. Use rich colors and clean detail, no text. Keep the background white when possible. Avoid harsh shadows or overly dark elements. And we're just doing this because on a cup, those things just tend to not look that good. So,
right. So the variable in green, just for the audience, like that won't always be a redhead, like drinking, whatever we said. So that's specific to whatever was previously just put into the Google spreadsheet. So it'll automatically take that information and pull it over to the OpenAI step.
Yeah, so it's always dynamic. So great point. So if I were to change this to a giraffe, you'll now see that this is a giraffe.
Awesome. Love it.
Right. A few more housekeeping stuff is just telling it what size of the image you want. There's 3 specs you can choose from OpenAI. And then the quality, if it's like lower standard, it'll be cheaper to run through API. If HD, more expensive. And then you can tell it, hey, I want vivid or natural style. And then once that's done, the output, if you go to the output bundle, is this URL. This URL basically links to the image that's been generated. Then the OpenAI step here, if we open this up, it says you are a product copywriter creating compelling descriptions for print-on-demand mugs sold online. Use the variables below to craft a short, engaging product description. So we have the description of our image. We have some metadata that we filled out in that sheet. And that's pretty much it here. The next step is we upload the image. So if we go to Printify, we just take the URL that was produced from OpenAI, and then we basically map it and name it product title _ image.png. We're adding this because it needs to be an image formatted file.
I see.
And then upload the image by URL. Why does that matter? These things matter a lot because it's all about the details. So you want to always ask yourself, when we run a module, what do we get? Do we get a text? Do we get a URL? Do we get a JSON? If you know what you're dealing with, you know how you can use it. And where people get stuck is they'll run this image thing and be like, okay, I don't have a file I can upload, but you got a URL, right? So you want to use this map thing and then you want to upload it via URL, and then you want to reference the URL, which is the image URL right here. And you can see we got that from the DALL-E step. And once you save it, the create a product is pretty straightforward. We're just going to say, hey, this is the name of the product. The description is based on the result from that OpenAI step. And then we have a blueprint ID. So in this case, we're just selecting what the product is. If you want to do multiple products, this would be slightly more complex, where we need to be able to manipulate what kind of product we're choosing. Let's say you want to give like not just mugs, but I don't know, women's tees, crew tees, the boyfriend tee, whatever it is you want. And then specify the variant, because you have SKUs for everything, right? So you have different tiers of mugs. In this case, this is the size of the mug, and then the price, if they are actually purchasing it, or whether or not we're giving it for free. These are the different variants you have. Okay, so we're just keeping our options open based on either 11 ounce or the 15 ounce. That's what we're specifying here.
Sweet, this all looks good. So that's the last step here. Let's actually see what an output of this would actually look like. I want to see me on a mug, or somebody that looks like me on a mug.
It definitely won't be you, because it's DALL-E, so get your expectations down.
Right.
But if we go to My Products, you'll see here we have a vibe coding cup. I think it might be still rendering. Let me see.
Oh, we didn't specify man or woman, so we got a woman. We got a woman redhead. Love it.
Woman redhead. Yeah, there we go.
Nice.
Now, this training of this model was of 2023, when vibe coding didn't exist, so it has no idea what I'm probably talking about. Right. But you can see like the power of this. The whole point of this automation is just to get people imagining that you can automate all kinds of processes, and even going from a Google Sheet entry to something at your door is fully possible.
Yeah, that's actually insane. And it was looked pretty simple to do, honestly. Nothing too crazy.
The most complex part was this part, which is the create a product, where you had to just make sure you go step by step and you fill out exactly what they're asking for. So this one was probably the most complex part of this automation, but I'll be providing all these scenarios for your audience to be able to import if they want to recreate them, play around, and change whatever.
Awesome. So what would that look like? Just like a link to some form of resource, and they could literally just upload it into make.com?
Great question. So how you import and export automations within seconds is you just go to this little 3 buttons at the bottom. You want to go to export blueprint. You will get that thing I referred to, that JSON. And just to show your audience, if they're not familiar, this is what JSON looks like. It looks like a series of information, and this is how information is exchanged. So what we can do is, if you want to import this now, let's just discard changes. And let us create a new scenario. If you go to more again and go to import blueprint, choose file, you'll see blueprint pops up here. I'll click save, and now, ta-da, you got all this.
Nice.
And now you won't have, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to ask, is the prompt in there, or will we need to configure the prompts and stuff for the ChatGPT steps?
Prompt, you can see, is in there.
Oh, nice. Cool.
Everything's in there, including the mapping. What you'll have to do is just sign into your specific accounts, your specific Google Sheet, create your own, in this case, a Printify account, get your API key from Printify, which I would say is also another step that you want to think about when building automation is, what is that API key? Where do I get it? In my case, I got lucky because I could write Printify API key access. And then when you go here, free request here, I went down and then I said generate API token, which usually, by the way, it's not that easy.
Right.
And then all I did is I clicked generate. It made me a key. And that was the key I used to be able to programmatically access Printify from make.com.
Easy. Nice. Cool. Yeah, that's awesome. The fact that you could just upload a template like that, instantly have it kind of not all put together, but at least like the prompting and stuff, which I think for a person that would just, like, if they wanted to use this, coming up with the prompting to get it like as specific as we did here would be maybe one of the difficult things. So it's awesome that they could just upload a template like that, which that's one thing with you and the automations you build. You have some awesome automations you've built, and I think you have linked some pretty cool resources on your channel as well. Mm-hmm. So if anybody's interested, Mark has some awesome content building things with make.com and his own channel. So shameless plug there for Mark, because he's got some pretty awesome stuff.
Absolutely shameless. But I think the most important thing for everyone is just to remember that the majority of the steps that would make this hard 2-3 years ago, or tricky 2-3 years ago, a lot of them you can offload. When it comes to writing a prompt, you can literally go to Claude or ChatGPT and say, you know what, act as a prompt engineer. Here's what I'm trying to accomplish. This is what I'm trying to do. Make a prompt and then copy that over. If you want to make HTML, go to Claude, ask it, make HTML, take these variables. You can, and then finally, like we saw at the beginning of this video, here's this automation, make me the workflow for this automation. We can offload 80%, and then the 20% is what takes some time, but at least all these parts are cheat coded for you.
Awesome. Love it. Somebody brand new to a platform like this, being able to go from 0 to 80%, and then having that 20% left is like much less daunting. It's like looking at a mountain but you've already climbed 80%. Like it's,
Yes.
oh, summit's right there. So it's like the resources are there to make it accessible for a non-technical person to build some pretty cool things with a platform like Make. And that's honestly why I wanted to bring Mark on, because a lot of the audience is non-technical. I want to showcase what you can build even if you are non-technical using a platform like Make.com. And he gave us some pretty cool hacks here that I think anybody could use. So that's why I'm happy we could do this episode today.
Yeah, and I'll do one more last giveaway gift, which is if you ever get stuck in Make, what's cool is if you get a problem, which typically you'll get many, you can just screenshot that problem and go to something like Perplexity or Claude, show it the actual screenshot of the error, upload the JSON of your blueprint and say, hey, here's what's happening, here's my blueprint, go search the internet and help me figure out what's going wrong. You can use AI to also troubleshoot for you instead of just being stuck and hitting your head against the wall. So that's the end of my bag of tricks for today.
Awesome. Well, that's a pretty full bag. So Mark, I appreciate it as always, man. Thanks for coming on the channel. Like I said earlier, he's got an amazing channel, Mark Kashef, Prompt Advisors, like one of my go-to guys when it comes to learning anything detailed about AI, because he understands the nuts and the bolts of stuff. So Mark, again, thanks for coming on, man. Really, really appreciate it. I know you're a busy guy, so
It's all good.
We're
both busy, but hopefully it's useful to your audience. And yeah, if you're daunted and you're non-techie, it's one of the best years to start building automation. So hopefully I'll be here again showing you some more sauce.
Love it. Cool. See you guys.